They want a sick note? I'll give them one. This can get a little long-winded, but there needs to be some semblance of backstory or background information so that we can all picture the situation. Sorry in advance. Here in the UK we have something called a benefits system. I think it's called social welfare in the US. Basically, you apply for one or more forms of support from the Department of Work and Pension, DWP, and hope that you don't have to go through tribunal for the application to stick. Yes, the DWP does everything they can not to award you with the support, forcing you to go through tribunal to get it. But I'm getting off topic a bit. For me, I spent years going through one form of benefits after another as they keep changing the system every so often. First it was incapacity benefits, IB, and job seekers allowance, JSA, which they changed to disability living allowance, DLA, and employment support allowance, ESA, respectively, and over time, until finally DLA was switched to personal independence payments, PIP. As part of these applications, I had to regularly send them sick notes from my doctor, or a doctor that is available from my registered surgery, which basically allowed the job center to stop pestering me to apply for 50 jobs per day, including jobs that I don't have qualifications for, or be docked my income. As the years went by, the doctors would first be allowed to fill out sick notes for 12 months before I had to get another one. Then it reduced to 6 months and then finally 3 months. Along the way, part way through being on ESA, the DWP started sending me responses that basically said, "We have received your sick notes and are now applying it to your account. You don't need to send any more after this one, as we'll continue paying you after this one runs out." Well, this is the DWP we're talking about. After the time on the sick note runs out, my income stops. I didn't know it was because the time had run out until I called them to find out why I wasn't paid. "You haven't been paid because your sick note ran out," was their response. When I mentioned the notice from them saying that I didn't have to send any more and they'll keep paying me, the reply was, "Doesn't matter. You need to send in another sick note in order to get paid." So I went and got another sick note, backdated and sent off. The response I got from that was the same as before. "We have received your sick notes and are now applying it to your account. You don't need to send any more after this one, as we'll continue paying you after this one runs out." So when it came to that sick note running out, I got another ready from the doctors. Sure enough, my money stopped and I sent off the sick note. "Sure enough, we have received you sick notes and are now applying it to your account. You don't need to send any more after this one, as we'll continue paying you after this one runs out." Rinse and repeat, until one day a few years later, after switching doctor's surgery, I went in to get yet another sick note. "Doctor, okay, what can I do for you?" Me, "I need a sick note so that the DWP will pay me." "Doctor, the DWP? That's odd." Me, "What is?" "Doctor, one moment." She rummages through my medical records and sees how many sick notes I've been getting across so many years. "Why are they asking for sick notes? What benefits are you on?" Me, "I'm on ESA and PIP. And no, I shouldn't need to be sending them sick notes." I proceeded to explain and show proof that they said that I don't need to send any more and that they'll keep paying me, only for them to stop paying me until I send another sick note. The doctor didn't look happy. "Doctor, well, if they want another sick note, then we'll give them one." She proceeded to fill out another sick note with the maximum 3 months limit on it. Printed it out but didn't give it to me just yet. Instead, she opened a document on her computer which I noticed was a blank letterhead sheet. You know the sort. Business address and logo pre-arranged at the top. Sign here arranged at the bottom, etc. All you do is fill in the blank. Well, the doctor, bless her heart and I'm grateful for this, proceeded to write a letter to the DWP where she gave them a roasting on their failings. How they refuse to accept that I am permanently ill and thus should be on the benefits permanently. How they said that I don't need to send in any more sick notes as they'll just keep paying me, only to turn around and stop paying the instant the sick notes run out. How they're basically saying that a registered general practitioner of medicine cannot say that an illness can or cannot be permanent. The list went on, repeatedly referring back to their negligence on the sick notes. In the end, she basically filled out an entire A4 page, ending with a threat that if they don't get themselves straightened out, she will file a complaint. She printed that off, signed both sheets and stapled them together and handed them to me. She kind of scared me as I read what she wrote. Well, I sent that sick note and complaints letter off to the DWP. Then when the 3 months limit came around, I eagerly awaited for my income to not be paid, only to find that they paid me. They actually paid me. Makes you think that my doctor scared them into correcting their mistakes, but yet again this is the DWP we're talking about. They changed their policy, that no matter the health condition, you need to renew your benefits every 2 or 3 years and go through the rigmarole of them refusing you the benefits, despite not being any better than your last application. If there was a thread called our DWP Nightmares, then I'd certainly have a dozen stories for that. Edit. Put paragraph spacing back in because Reddit removed them. My mom was born with spina bifida and is paraplegic. She's been on the US equivalent off and on for years, mostly because they insist she recertify every 3 years that she is indeed still paraplegic. One time she joked that one day she was gonna write them a letter in response that amounted to the following: after 50 years of paraplegia, 8 back surgeries before I was 12, 4 metal rods and an unknown number of pins keeping it all together, I've somehow made a miraculous recovery. My back is healed and my legs work just fine now. Your insistent need to make sure I'm still catastrophically disabled cured me of my permanent disability. It's so stupid we make people who are permanently sick jump through any hoops at all. My son has a son who has Down syndrome. This is present from the moment of conception and is not something which can be cured. You have it for life. Every year, without fail, the government sends her a letter asking if her son still has Down syndrome and requires a doctor's certificate to certify he still has it. Your doctor scared them into actually looking at your file and unchecking or checking the appropriate box for permanent. The bureaucracy saw that somebody might have to be held accountable and actually did their job all the way properly this time. Kudos. My sister has Down syndrome, and for a long while the government were making my mom fill out a massive form every year to ascertain whether she was still eligible for her benefits. Absolute clowns. As it is, they have removed a huge chunk of financial support now she's an adult because my mom has savings put aside for sis's future care when mom isn't able anymore. They demand that she use that money now instead. Face with rolling eyes clown face. Well, slap my knee and call me compliant. Bravo, bureaucracy, you've outdone yourself. Hands clapping. I've just been through the PIP process and am at the appeal stage, but I have basically given up. It's sickening how casual they are about re-traumatizing people. Every appointment, every interview, every conversation with these people just adds to the trauma and stress and anxiety. I'm so fed up of having to fight every step of the way to prove I'm human to people who are just ticking boxes on a form to get even the tiniest amount of financial help. So even though I know I'll very likely be back here in a year or two, Had a breakdown last year that I survived by the skin of my teeth, which I am still recovering from. I have to try and go back to work and hope against hope things will change. The social security system here in Oz is just as bad. Indeed. You may have seen the papers the last week about robo-debt, which was an absolute fustercluck. Heads should roll, including former ministers of the crown. But they won't. There may be a token civil servant who might get horsewhipped for the public's amusement. Metaphorically speaking, of course. But I expect there will be no real consequences. TL Drive. Doctor tears government organization a new ass when they repeatedly inconvenience a disabled person. This was good. Saw one poster a while back in a similar bind. Boss wouldn't give one of their workers the op of the story. A few sick days when they needed it unless they got a doctor's note. Else they'd be at risk of being fired. The doc scrawled up a note that entitled them to the whole week off. When op showed up and gave the note to the boss's boss found out and had quite the go at the boss for it. Sometimes I come to think that those systems' goal is to make you give up on your benefits. Sorry you have to go through this just to live your life somewhat normally. Seems to be a common problem around the globe. I live in Germany and my mill constantly has to prove that long COVID isn't the result of an illness she had dozens of years ago. A dear friend stopped trying to get a new lung after the psychological exams screwed him up so much that he became too ill to even be considered an organ recipient. And a student told me that he had to prove again and again that his father was still dead in order to get his BAföG, basically the slightly more friendly version of a student loan. Well, necromancy isn't a real thing, I guess. But there's no common sense behind those rules. They're just prefabricated templates that may or may not fit an actual life situation. Been there. I had a leg injury that turned to sepsis and wouldn't heal for 2 years. I had a letter that said I was fit for work, on the principle that I can still do jobs that were done sitting down. So I turned up at the job center. Whole leg bandaged, and not able to bend in the middle. Foot too swollen to fit in a shoe. Having to hang onto the banister and do maneuvers to get up the steps. They took one look at me and sent me home and I had no more bother for 3 months. I then had to go for an assessment, which said I was fit for limited work. I appealed and got 6 months more pay while waiting for my tribunal, by which time I was a lot better. Love your GP. Every couple of years. I go through this in the US. Am in a wheelchair. 1 year. I printed off all my medical records for them and shipped it. Still have to fill out the renewals. I'm sad that this is also your normal. It seems red tape is just as bad in the UK as it is here in America. My very sincere condolences, yummy face. I remember a story, in Canada, where an amputee had to have proof that they hadn't grown their missing limb back every year. Edit to add link to 2015 news story about it. https globalnews.ca/news/1878542/no solution yet for injured veterans forced to repeatedly prove amputated limbs are still missing. My son had a brain hemorrhage which left him partially paralyzed and with epilepsy. Initially, he was given a full PIP award. Then came a reassessment. Nothing had changed. Unsurprisingly, where it was decided to reduce the payment drastically. He couldn't face an appeal. Last year we went for a change of circumstances. He's getting older. Things are more difficult. Additional conditions have appeared. He nearly drowned in the bath, etc. We had endless medical letters to support it. The PIP assessor denied the claim and actually wrote they could see nothing wrong with his right hand. It's his left side that doesn't work. Hallelujah. It's a miracle. Since then, he's felt so much better. Ha ha. Again. He can't face an appeal. I went to tribunal and was in there for less than 10 minutes before the doctor looked up from my notes and said, "What on earth are you doing here? You shouldn't be going through this?" I then dealt with yearly medicals. Before finally meeting a young doctor that hadn't been beaten down by the auto system yet and had his humanity removed. He made a big song and dance about my condition being lifelong and never going to get better. It's been almost 5 years now since I heard from them last. Although my heart still skips a beat when a brown envelope come through the door. The anxiety those envelopes have caused I don't think will ever go away. It's bad here in Canada for people with disabilities too. Some of you may know already that medical assisted dying MAID is legal in Canada under certain qualifying conditions. There have been numerous press reports from disabled individuals who have been approached by hospital officials who have tried to talk them into taking MAID. Trying to get support for my disabled child who's under 18 is like pulling teeth, and have actually been called out by some that my kid is not worth their tax dollars to help. When he passes 18, most of these supports stop completely and we're on our own. I could write reams of paragraphs of the underhanded tactics being employed by the provincial government to deny any sort of benefits, and the attitude that they think we're all taking advantage of the system. It's exhausting, heartbreaking, and it certainly feels like they're deliberately wearing people down to take the MAID option. Point is, I totally get it op. It's maddening to see here the people who need the help the most are the ones being stomped onto. Save tax dollars. OMG. All this time and money loss for a disease you can't cure. Tired. My first husband was a paraplegic. Severed spinal cord from a car accident. He could still work desk jobs. While working he did nor collect disability payments. But every now and again he would get pressure sores or required extensive surgery that required weeks, months out of work. Social Security disability always pushed back, stating we was nit disabled enough to get short-term benefits. We actually got a letter from the government that we framed stating that he was no longer disabled and did not qualify for disability payments. My mother came from Scotland to live with us in Australia, and she regularly had to reply to a letter from these twats in the UK requesting proof that she was still alive. Face with rolling eyes.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Aircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.